Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today on workplace stress. I'm Melissa, I'm a business psychologist at Thrive. And today with me, I have Dom, who's also a business psychologist at Thrive. Hi, Dom, how are you?
Hi, Alyssa, I'm good, thank you.
So yeah, thank you for being here. And just to let you know, this webinar will be recorded and a link will be sent to you at the end. It should last for around 30 to 40 minutes, so it won't be such a long webinar, but we'll have a 15-minute Q&A session at the end. If you do have any questions, please use the Q&A box. And if you have any comments, please use the chat function. We will get to them at the end of the session today. You can also raise your hand if you would like to say something, and I can unmute you from the chat if you'd like to speak. So yeah, you can do that as well. So let's get straight into it. So just to let you know, this webinar is designed for employers. So it's not really meant for the individual employee. We will be talking through a couple of models, a couple of stress models, and tips and tricks on how to help employees to manage their stress inside at work and outside at work, and why it really matters to understand stress within work a little bit better. So the first topics we'll be covering is what is stress at work, why does it matter for us to get a better understanding of stress at work, and what are stressors inside and outside of work and how they can influence us. Then the second half of this webinar will be exploring a few different models within the literature. So we will be talking about the job demands resource model and the effort reward balance model. So both of these, we will be talking about how they can be used for interventions and management of stress, and how they can be applied if you're a manager or a leader or an employer, how you can use the theory behind these models to create better plans to help your employees face the stressors they might be facing on a daily basis. So yeah, what is work stress? The definition of work-related stress is that it is something you experience when the demand of the work environment exceeds the worker's ability to cope with them. So in other words, demands are higher than the resources one can draw on. We will later on go in more detail of what exactly these demands and these resources are when I talk a little bit about stresses. So when we experience stress for a prolonged period of time, this can have really detrimental effects on our body, on our mental and physical well-being as well. Our body goes into fight or flight or freeze mode. We might get sweaty palms, an increased heart rate, shallow breathing, an upset stomach, etc. And this is a natural reaction for when we are in life-threatening situations, as elevated levels of arousal helps us to react faster to save our lives. However, we need to ask ourselves, is this response really necessary for when we are at work? Sometimes we might get this same reaction when we have an important deadline coming up or when we have to deliver an important presentation. But when we think about it, even if we do not meet the deadline or the presentation does not go so well, it really won't kill us. So importantly, all the stored up energy that we have built up inside of us cannot be released, and these stresses will keep reoccurring in our work and our daily lives. So this then brings me on to the next point about chronic and acute stress. As we said before, acute stress is healthy. It is there to save our lives and help us to perform and react quicker in stressful or life-threatening situations. However, chronic stress is brought about by constant stressors we face within the work environment, causing us to continuously be in a state of fight, flight, or freeze and have this stored up energy inside of us. This will deplete our energy resources and can result in the development of mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression, or physiological complications such as cardiovascular disease. So it's really important to get a better understanding of how we manage the stress response and find coping strategies that can help us with this. So this is what the individual can do. However, in this webinar, like I said before, I really do want to focus on what employers can do for their employees at an organizational level in order to minimize the impact of stressors and reassure employees that they have resources and support within the organization to deal with these challenges that they are facing on a daily basis. So why is it important for organizations to get a better understanding of stress within the workplace? There are two main reasons. One is looking at the benefits for the organizations in terms of productivity. And the other and most important one is safeguarding and protecting human values. It's easy to understand the financial impact sick leave has, basically. Specifically sick leave related to mental health on organizations. So the stats show that in 2019, 12.8 million workdays were lost due to work-related stress, depression, and anxiety. So from an organizational perspective, thinking in terms of costs, profit, and effectiveness, having workers who are burned out or overworked can leave a lasting impact on growth. Also, the quality of work could decline as the likelihood of making errors will increase. However, even though this is a significant part of when considering the impact of stress within the workplace, we foremost have to protect human values by looking after the health and safety of employees. In 2018-19, 602,000 workers reported suffering from work-related stress, depression, or anxiety. There has been an upward rising trend over the past few years, which could mean two things. Either demands of the workplace have changed due to globalization and 24/7 connectivity, or people start feeling more empowered to talk about their concerns and mental health at the workplace due to increased awareness and education and changing organizational values over time, which is the good news. Either way, we can see how vast and widespread this issue is, and so we need to continue to address it for several reasons. To increase motivation, satisfaction, and engagement at work, to provide employees with the opportunity to find a healthy work-life balance and quality of life, as well as to increase their overall mental, but also in turn physical well-being, as these are closely interlinked to one another. By caring for the individual and supporting them in looking after their well-being, this automatically will result in increased productivity at work. So first we need to look at the individual before we address effectiveness or productivity from an organizational point of view, because this will also come automatically once you have looked after the individual and made sure the individual is feeling valued and looked after and is feeling well, basically. So how do we go about this? What we need to find out is what the mediators are that can reduce stress and increase well-being. But first we need to understand exactly what these stressors are. So what are these stressors? Stressors are physical or psychological stimuli present, perceived, or anticipated. They are perceived through individual experience, how we think about them, how we respond to them, and what coping strategies we have available to deal with them. Stressors can be internal or external. We will be mostly focusing on external stressors, which many of us have to face throughout our lifetimes. So some examples of these could be big life events such as divorce, loss, personal injury or illness, marriage, retirement, pregnancy, change to a different line of work, trouble with a boss, financial worries, etc. As you can see, they can be both inside and outside work. I mentioned a few from inside and outside work. So there are also daily events which can be stressors. So they don't only have to be big life events, such as being stuck in traffic, not finding your keys, job dissatisfaction, closed deadlines, lack of sleep, and so on. So the accumulation of stressors can ultimately result us in not feeling that we're able to cope anymore at some point if we do not have the right support around us and the resources we can draw upon in order to cope with them well. So two researchers, Cooper and Marshall, have developed a holistic model illustrating all the different factors that need to be taken into account when trying to understand what stressors employees may be facing and how this can affect them. They came up with different categories for stress at work. This can be either intrinsic to work, such as workload and time pressure, the person's role within the organization, which includes role ambiguity and role conflict, career development, which can be job security, over promotion or even under promotion, relationships at work, which includes delegating responsibilities and relationships with your boss as well as co-workers, as well as organizational structure and climate, which can be autonomy and decision-making, office politics, and so on. The next component of the model explores how individual characteristics influence the way these stresses are perceived and dealt with. People with high level of anxiety and neuroticism and low tolerance to ambiguity will not be able to cope with these stresses well. This can ultimately lead to maladaptive coping strategies such as smoking and drinking, as well as reduced job satisfaction, but also physical health complications from elevated heart rate as well as elevated cholesterol levels. All of this can negatively impact an employee's mental health as well as their physical health, for example, resulting in coronary heart disease. Lastly, it is not just the personal characteristics or work-related factors that need to be considered when exploring stresses that employees face, but also what goes on in this person's private life. There might be family problems, financial difficulties, health complications, etc., which increase the levels of stress as well. So the point of this is that we all face unique stressors inside and outside of work. Even if we do face similar stressors, sometimes our individual characteristics and the coping mechanisms available to us that we have learned in our lifetime determine how we respond to them or whether we can handle them at all. It always is important to keep in mind individual differences when trying to improve well-being and change and organizational change, because that will be the most effective way to implement long-lasting change by addressing individual needs. And this is why this extensive model was added to our presentation, just to give you an overview of the stressors and the background of stressors that each individual might be facing and how individual characteristics can influence those and the perception of those as well. You might now think that because we're all so different, there may never be an intervention that can suit everyone. And yes, that definitely is a challenge, but one that organizational psychologists and HR, we work closely together with to understand and tackle those individual problems and characteristics and find solutions to them. From a research perspective, there are two models that encompass individual needs on a broader scale and how these match to organizational support. Dom will now be talking about the job demands resource model.
Thank you, Alyssa. So the imbalance between job resources and job demands. So what are job demands and what are job resources? So job demands are the physical and the emotional stresses in any individual's job role. So these could include things like time pressures, heavy workloads, generally stressful environment, and poor relationships between the manager and the employee, and just the general employee relationships between themselves. So job resources are considered to be physical, social, and organizational factors that help to achieve goals and reduce stress. So imagine them as job positives. It's things that improve the motivation and the engagement of your workforce. These may include strong relationships, opportunities, coaching, mentoring, learning, and development. So the general statement of this model is that when job demands are too high and resources are too low, stress will be a common factor which could lead to burnout. On the other hand, good job positives can offset the effects of stress and increase employees' motivation. If you are interested in applying this model, it is important to identify the stresses that have briefly been mentioned before. So things that we've talked about, so poor relationships, short deadlines, lack of opportunities, and etc. So addressing changes can be difficult, difficult because there might be one that you're unable to change or reduce. Trying to separate the ones that you can change from the ones you can't, and then try to reduce these demands and increase the positive job resources. However, it is important to notice that every person is different in your team, and they will have different needs and different reactions to stress, and just general stresses that will influence them. So what one person might find stressful, for another it will be completely normal, or it will just be a minor inconvenience for them. So it is important to talk to each person individually, but we'll come to that later on when we'll be talking about interventions. So now Alyssa is going to talk to you about the imbalance between effort and the rewards.
Yeah, so the second model that we will be covering and that I will be touching on is the effort-reward imbalance model. This highlights the importance of finding a balance between the effort, what the employee puts in their work, and the reward, what the employee gets out of their work. So similar to the job demands resource model, we are again talking about finding a balance, but not this time between demands and resources. This time it's between effort and reward. Now this can be unique to each employee depending on their needs and their job role. The effort someone puts into their work can be seen in many ways. For example, how many deadlines they have, meaning that they are often under time pressure, if they have many responsibilities, such as managing a big team, or if they are asked to be on call frequently or to work overtime, or to have work during times, let's say that they, like shift work, let's say. The reward they can get is generally categorized into 3 areas: esteem, job promotion, and job security. So for example, esteem can be respect from supervisors or colleagues, support, fair treatment, and acknowledgement of the value of their work and the value of their contribution to the organization as a whole. Job promotion can relate to the prospects of promotion, having a position that is adequate to qualifications, or receiving a salary that aligns with the expectations of the role. Finally, there's job security. This is about the likelihood of retaining the job, receiving benefits, having a pension, and generally feeling that there will be no sudden or undesirable changes. It can be of use for managers to get a better understanding of what efforts their direct reports have to put into their work and what rewards they would value the most to get out of this. Because this can be unique to every employee, and by getting a better understanding of this, organizations can support individuals' needs and the employees to increase, of course, their job satisfaction and to also keep them motivated. If a balance between effort and reward is not reached, this could potentially result in overcommitment. This is when the individual shows excessive striving in combination with a strong desire of being approved and esteemed. The problem with this is that the individual may feel that no matter how much they receive the reward of being approved or esteemed, it will never be enough for how much effort they have put into what they are doing, resulting in them feeling let down time and time again. So it is really important to help the employee to have realistic expectations of reward in their minds and make sure that they take notice when they do receive the reward. So now Dominika will go into some tips on how employers can support their employees while taking into account stressors, job demands, job resources, and the balance between effort and reward.
So here we have for you some short tips. So we've got the regular one-to-ones, we've got supportive conversation and increasing workplace resources and using CBT and mindfulness to increase resilience. So work can be the most stressful factor in people's lives. Many don't feel comfortable to ask for help when they are struggling. Hence, it is vital that management routinely asks staff how they are doing and just to discuss their mental health. It does help people to speak earlier and get the help and work accommodations that they might require sooner. It is important to know that you do not require any special skills in order to have supportive conversations. just the ones that you use every day as a manager. So as long as you have as long as you're empathetic and you're approachable and you're a good listener, you basically, you tick the boxes. So it might help to keep in mind to explore the different stresses your direct report is facing, whether those are inside or outside of work, to see whether you can support them with reducing those in any type of way. Then you can look into how they feel that there might be an imbalance between their demands placed on them and the resources that they have to deal with them. You can create a plan together on how to reduce these demands and increase resources so that they can cope better. Or if this is not the case, it might be that they feel that they are not being rewarded or the effort that they are putting into the work. This is where you can ask them what reward they would value the most, whether that is esteem, job promotion, or job security. Then you can adjust accordingly to increase job satisfaction. It is important to know that, every individual is different, so it's advisable to have a conversation about this with every single individual in your work, in your team. So moving on to regular one-to-one conversations. This leads us to the importance of having that regular conversation. It is something that is widely acknowledged in the organisational setting. It is a necessary tool that ensures accountability and improves relationships between team members and the leaders. Having that regular one-to-one allows clear communication and any feedback, and vice versa. So whether it's you having a feedback towards the employee, or whether, employee would like to raise any issues, about your management style or anything, it's an open conversation. So during this time, you can literally address any issues. So these could include performance or general productivity, or if they would like to talk anything that basically affects them in personal life, they can. You just have to be very empathetic and very open and non-judgmental, basically, when it comes to it. So it would be a good practice to set up a one-to-ones once a month at least, so it becomes a part of that regular routine. So this would help to facilitate the conversation. When having these one-to-ones, it is important to encourage mutual feedback, as mentioned briefly before, by empowering your direct report to reflect on what has gone right and what hasn't, and where you could have maybe done something differently. Especially now during these difficult times, it is important to have regular check-ins. A lot of organisations are working from home at the time, and they have been working for the last months, and it can be very daunting to work from home. So a lot of people obviously feel isolated, so it is important to ensure that you know what is going on with your team. Perhaps finding that online tool that works for you and for everyone else, so whether it's Microsoft Teams or Skype or phone, just try to make sure that you have scheduled these conversations in advance. Some daily chat time with them, or regular time in the diary as team for people, once every fortnight, for example, or once a month, as briefly mentioned. Whatever works for you and works for them, that is the way forward. By having these conversations, you are letting them know that you are there to support them during these difficult times and throughout. So using CBT and mindfulness to increase resilience. Developing resilience is a very personal thing, and there's no one-size-fits-all technique. So individuals might need to experiment to find the way that works for them. So ensure that your employees have regular breaks so they can use that time to relax and switch off. There are times where obviously individuals can become very stressed, and if you see how overwhelmed they can be, perhaps just offer them, take a 5-minute or 10-minute air break, for example, or just go for a walk, just for them to switch off from the feelings of stress that they currently experience. So how they switch off and relax is completely up to them, but it's important that they're able to detach themselves from whatever is making them feel stressed, overwhelmed, or anxious, as mentioned. So it could be something that includes going out for lunch or casual walk outside during the break, as long as they are not in the office or the actual work building, can help them feel more comfortable. If they find it hard to switch off, perhaps suggest to them to try a deep muscle relaxation, meditation, or deep breathing. These can ease the feelings of stress and overwhelm quite quickly. So the Thrive app contains all of these. So I'd recommend to let your employees know that they can play around and choose the ones that works best for them. Furthermore, learning CBT skills can help individuals to identify their unhelpful thoughts and beliefs and ways to reframe them to become more helpful, which as a result, they'll be able to respond more effectively in a stressful situation. But yet again, the Thrive Up contains this. It's all about, you know, working throughout and like practicing, and over time, they would be able to become a little bit more resilient to stressful situations.
Yeah. Thanks, Dom. Yeah, and I just want to quickly mention also increasing the workplace resources, because that's what we were talking about before in the models, the job demands resource model. So this includes autonomy, making sure that they have, that they're able to make decisions in their job role, allowing them to have any training that they feel that might help them to perform better or help them to feel that they are developing their individual skills, as well as understanding what skills they do have and if they are managing to use all the skills that are available to them, because often sometimes they might feel that they have some skills which they are not able to use in their daily work, which they could start applying somewhere. So this will help to increase the job satisfaction as well, when they feel like they can use all the skills and all the resources that they have available to them in order to perform their job to the best of their abilities. So yeah, this brings us on to the recap then. So work-related stress is experienced when the demand of the work environment exceeds the worker's ability to cope with them. Acute versus chronic stress. So again, saying how acute stress is short-term stress. It helps us to perform better, helps us to react faster, is there for life-saving, to save our lives in threatening situations. And if this turns into chronic stress due to common stresses that we have to face on a daily basis, it can result in a lot of health complication, whether this is mental or physical health complications such as depression and anxiety, or physical health such as cardiovascular disease. Then there was the importance of understanding stress at work, and I really want to emphasize on safeguarding and protecting human values, which is one of the main reasons. But of course, speaking from an organizational perspective, once you are making people feel well at work, you are automatically increasing productivity and helping people to work better, and increasing resources at the workplace can help for growth of the organization as a whole. So stresses inside and outside of work. So there was this big model by Cooper and Marshall that I showed to you, which encompassed stresses which we face inside of work, stresses which are faced outside of work, and how individual differences such as neuroticism and extroversion, or any of those individual personality differences, can also determine how people react to those stressors, or how people deal with them, and what kind of coping mechanisms people then have when they are faced with many stressors. Then Dom talked a little bit about the job demands resources, what the job demands are, which are those physical or mental characteristics of a job that deplete your resources, where you have to have sustained effort and that drain you of your energy, whereas those resources are the ones that help you to build your energy back up, and they help you to do your job better, and they help you to deal with those stresses and help with coping mechanisms, help you to get to those goals that you would like to strive to. Then there's the effort reward imbalance model. So effort is what you put into your work, and the reward is what you get out of your work. There's different types of reward that you can receive, whether this is esteem, job promotion, or job security. It really depends on the individual and what their job role is and what they feel like they value in the moment. So always good to explore that. Then lastly, we talked about interventions and management. So making sure you have those regular one-to-ones, making sure you have those supportive conversations, understanding which workplace resources you can increase and what stresses you can actually help them with, whether that's inside or outside work. And lastly, the recommendation of CBT and mindfulness when you see someone who is stressed, or even for yourself, to go through these techniques in order to be able to deal with that fight or flight stress response, or to be able to have better understanding of your emotions, feelings, and thoughts, and how they influence your behavior, basically. So yeah, that brings us to the end of this presentation. I hope you managed to take away some tips for this, and managed to think of some ideas of what you would like to cover, maybe for your next one-to-one, how you want to support your direct reports, how you want to support your employees. But if you do have any questions, please type them into the chat, or just raise your hand and I'm going to let you talk to the group. If you have any opinions, or if you want to talk a bit about how you do your one-to-ones, please let me know. I would love to hear some feedback, or just some advice from you guys, because maybe you have some good tips on how to. Somebody raise their hand, let me just check, on how to have those one-to-ones. Dom, did somebody raise their hand? No, right?
I think someone did earlier, but I didn't manage to press in time. So if someone would like to speak, would you like to raise your hand again? Or
I would love to hear tips from you as well, if you have any ideas on best practice for one-to-ones, if you have any success stories, or if you feel that you want to share anything. Yeah. Okay, great. Kemi. Yeah, you can unmute yourself, please, if you would like to talk.
Hi.
Hi.
I wonder if you can help. It's just a couple of little things to help people potentially at this point in time, where I might think someone is under some stress, and I try to reach out to them by just asking questions, not necessarily making it work-based, but they're just not engaging. How would you suggest potentially dealing with that?
Yeah, sure. Of course, it's up to the individual if they would like to open up and talk about their stressors. So giving them the freedom to do that. But a good way in is always to open up yourself. So if you start by saying, hi, you know, I've been feeling a little bit stressed myself, or I'm facing these stresses at the moment. How about you? Do you feel the same, or is it just me, or do you want to talk? Because sometimes if you open up yourself, it kind of paves the way for the other person to feel mutual and open back up to you as well. So maybe if you start in that kind of way, or if you
sorry to interrupt. I totally agree with you, and I've done that, you know, because from a personal perspective, it's been quite a stressful few months, you know, managing teams remotely, not being able to have that sort of, you know, because body language speaks volumes, obviously. So that not having that sort of face-to-face thing, and even like in team meetings, not really getting a sense of how people are feeling. You know, some people are more forthcoming than others, and I've been very open with my team about, you know, the stresses I've had. I just feel like I'm looking for a way to, I think I'm empathetic, and I think I'm very open. Generally, you know, my friends come to me for advice and things like that. You know, I'm not an expert in everything, possibly in nothing. However, I like to think I can listen and see different points of views. And I just feel like right now, and I could be completely wrong, but I just feel like I'm not getting engagement from some people, and I really don't know how they feel, which in a way worries me a little bit as well, because I'd rather get in front of it, you know, because I value every member of my team, obviously, rather than it becoming a step, you know, to such an extent that they, I don't know, almost back themselves into a corner and don't feel like they can reach out again. I feel like I just need to break some kind of cycle. I don't know, I might be wrong, but it just, you know, it's just a gut feeling, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. And those worries are definitely understandable, especially at this time of remote working. It's really easy to lose contact and feel kind of disconnected from people. So what else you can do is actually to formulate those worries to your direct reports and say, I'm worried that I'm not here to support you enough and that I'm not here listening to you enough. Do you feel like that? Do you feel that I should do more for you? And really let them know what the goal of this conversation is. Say, my goal with this conversation is to help you find support if you need it. If you don't, just let me know. But I just want you to know that I'm here. So please let me know.
That's useful. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for your contribution. Yeah, so thank you, Kemi. That was very insightful, and she raised some really, really good points about the difficulties of remote working and keeping connected to people. If anyone has any other concerns they would like to raise, very happy to hear them out. So Cassandra has said we have been having a round at virtual team meetings where each person has the opportunity to say how they are feeling, share a tip on how they are managing, etc. The colleagues who are happy to be open and speak have really encouraged others to speak. It's working for us. Yeah, that's great. Those encouraging group conversations and open one-to-ones can really help find support and we can validate each other's feelings and find this sort of like support group for each other. And it's really always encouraging to create those support groups and facilitate them as a manager as well, to create an environment where we can all feel, even if you are the manager, to say, this is not about me talking about performance or about being your manager. We are all the same here. We're all just human beings. So let's be open and facilitate this conversation in a positive way.
It can be quite difficult for certain individuals, obviously, to have that group conversation and talk about the feelings. So I think it's still very important to even follow up, like, you know, certain individuals with that one-to-one conversation, as they can be quite shy in front of others. So it's, you know, having a team conversation, great, but also have that regular, you know, sort of supportive conversation during that one-to-one as well. I think that's quite important to note as well.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Dom. That's absolutely right. Some people don't feel too comfortable talking in front of other people about personal issues, or even talking. I've heard there was a couple of stories where people have told me that they even in chat. So for example, if we have Slack and we have big group chats, and some people just feel uncomfortable talking in big group chats or mentioning anything because it's just feels like a lot of pressure on them. So just making sure that the individual is looked after as well as the group as a whole is important, of course.
Does anyone else have any other tips that they would like to share?
Yeah, Russ. Hi, Russ.
Hi there. I was just hoping to run a bit of theory past yourselves. It's to do with folks who seem to have let a piece of work or something kind of get the better of them. They seem to have become almost not quite afraid of it, but it's something they feel they don't seem to have any control over, and they seem to get quite angsty about it. I mean, I've done a wee bit of reading into it, and I can't help but draw the conclusion that what you have to do is you have to almost stimulate that little bit of fear and bring that emotion to the top. And then once they're kind of in that sort of state where it's a piece of work they don't feel they have control over, or they just don't quite know what to do next with it, or they're making it into a bigger deal than it actually is, you kind of almost bring that emotion out in them. And then once that emotion is out, you go about just playing the part of chopping it down to size for them. So you indicate, you know, potential solutions, or you indicate that those factors that they're worrying about aren't quite as important as they think they are, or even just get them to kind of talk through for themselves how they're going to approach it next, what they're going to do. Is it that combination of kind of bringing the emotion out into the open and then helping them chop it down to size? Is that a valid technique, or has it got its risks, or is it invalid?
It depends on how it's handled. It does have its risks, of course, because you're bringing on about like some emotions that might be quite intense for them. So you need to be prepared that this might be quite a difficult conversation to them. But if you feel comfortable having this conversation with them, if you feel that, well, you could always signpost them, of course, if you feel like they need professional support. But at the same time, yes. So we were talking about cognitive behavioral therapy before, CBT, as one of the things that we recommend for people. So this helps them to understand the emotions and thoughts they have about, let's say, particular topics or particular scenarios, or like you said, particular pieces of work, and help them to break down those emotions and understand how they make them feel, how they influence their behavior, and how to think about things from a different perspective, which I think that's what you were mentioning before, that you would break this down and then help them to maybe see things differently. For example, if people, let's say, make a mistake and they say to themselves, I feel like I'm a failure, to break that down and be like, no, this is not how you should feel, this wasn't your fault, and basically mistakes are good for us to make so that we can learn from them and grow from them, and so kind of changing their mindset to be more resilient. Is that what you mean?
It very much is. I mean, that kind of comment you make about mistakes, I mean, you know, culturally, mistakes seem to not be particularly something that we can handle that well. But something that has always kind of jumped to my mind is that if you'd brought somebody in, especially somebody new who's just tackling the work for the first time, you want to get them into a position where they feel that they can go and make mistakes. And it is really important just to get in if something has gone wrong, just to go, all right, you know, mistakes been made, but you know, what are you going to do next? And almost just kind of just shift them on to what they're going to do next almost seems to diminish it. And just trying to encourage that culture of you know, be willing to try and fail, because that's the only way that they're going to learn. It is that it's just getting them almost, and it's funny you mentioned CBT, it's almost kind of taking those emotions and just getting them to rationalize it and just look at it logically almost. I get the impression that there's a chunk of that in there. And this kind of is basically learning how to almost take your emotions and sort of douse them in water, I suppose, just to calm things down. Would that be a useful metaphor, I suppose?
Yeah, definitely. And as a manager and as a leader, it's really important.
I just think about myself most of the time, to be honest.
But it's useful to have these skills in general, because when people do come to you, when you do have direct reports, and you, like as you say, when there's new people within the company who are not quite sure of what they're doing, to be able to break these things down for them and support them, and then refer them onto, you know, ways to build their own resilience through learning CBT for themselves as well. Like you said, you're doing this for yourself, but at the same time, by knowing these techniques, you're already helping others when you're talking to others as well. So yeah, it's very useful.
I guess what I'm saying though maybe does slightly contradict the advice that is given out, which is you can listen but not advise, because you're supposed to leave that for folks that have got that kind of background. I just wanted to add any comments on that.
Yeah, it's of course, like listening is the main focus. Listening and thinking about where you can help the person find the right support that they need. So signposting them to the right support depending on how risky or severe you think this person might be or what they're facing. So, but sometimes if you learn these techniques for yourself, you're automatically able to let's say, have a more fruitful conversation or a more mindful conversation about these things, because you are already aware of how these emotions, behaviors, and thoughts and interact with one another. So you're able to advise in a better way, and then help them to sign. But you're absolutely right. Keep it to the professionals, but it's very useful for people to feel like they have somebody who they can talk to, who can understand.
I suppose just listening to what you're saying there, I guess that term listening is quite important in the sense that if you are to get to the stage, if you're not going to signpost them, you want to intervene yourself because you feel for whatever reason that's the only way you're going to get this to progress. I guess you probably have to spend quite a lot of time, getting to know the person and listening to all the details. And once you've kind of built up that body of knowledge about the person, only at that point can you really intervene. Because if you try and intervene too early, without having filled in the backstory, you may just make the situation worse. And I guess would that be the key, I suppose, if you were to rather than signpost, try and make an intervention yourself, it's very much a case you need to get the detail about them first through listening to them for quite a number of weeks before you can then make that move, so to speak.
Yeah, you definitely have to have a conversation with that person, but it also depends on the case. So it goes by case-to-case basis. So the other training that we do is mental health awareness training, where we do talk about having those one-to-ones and how to have the conversation. And a big part of it is understanding the risk the person is facing. So for example, if somebody is presenting to you with distress, dysfunction, and a big impact on their day-to-day well-being, and that they're not able to perform their everyday tasks as the same way that they used to, then an immediate intervention needs to be made. So immediately this person needs to be signposted and support needs to be found. When it's low risk or moderate risk, then it's good to have a conversation with the person and you agree with the person on what the conversation is about, and you make a plan with that person together, whether they will let's say get in contact with the EAP, get in contact with a counselor or GP. So you make a plan together with them and in agreement with them. This is just so the conversation is there to, like you said, get a bit of background and understanding of what is happening and the risks this person is facing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you for your contribution. Sorry, my internet connection, I think, is a bit unstable. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, sorry, it's just showing up on my screen. Yeah, so thank you, Ross. That was really insightful and very, very helpful for you to stimulate this conversation about having the conversation and different approaches to take, and understanding how to help people to tackle challenges within their life and tackle different stressors, as well as difficult projects that they might be facing or when they make mistakes. So thank you for that. Is there anyone else who would like to talk about their own experiences as well, or talk about any things that they're unsure about, or have any questions? If not, then I think I'm going to end the session here today. Thank you everyone for your contribution. It was nice to see you all here, and hopefully you took away some tips for your next one-to-ones and your next conversations that you will have with your direct reports or whoever you will have a conversation with. So thank you very much, everyone. Bye.